we shall never go back to Nigeria again. God's grace will surely emerge as a nation. And so, as far as this war continues, we'll fight to the last man.
Burning at the house!
They said the war would end in weeks, but it lasted for 30 long months. They said it was a war to keep Nigeria one, but for millions, it became a war for survival. From 1967 to 1970, Nigeria bled from within. More than 1 million people, most of them innocent children, died not from bullets, but from hunger, disease, and neglect. This was not a foreign invasion. This was brother fighting brother, neighbors turning against each other, a war that should never have happened. How did a country blessed with hope, oil, and freedom fall into such tragedy? How did a nation that once celebrated independence with joy end up destroying its own people? The answers lie not just in history books, but in the decisions of men who had the power to do what was right and failed. This is not a story of who was right or wrong. It is not about blame. It is about what happens when leadership fails, when ego replaces wisdom, and when a government ignores the cries of its own people. This is the story of Biafra, the war Nigeria could have prevented, but didn't. Now, let us return to where it all began. On October 1st, 1960, Nigeria became an independent nation. People were filled with joy and pride. For the first time, the country would be ruled by its own people, not by British colonizers. But behind that celebration was a dangerous truth. Nigeria's foundation was not solid. The country was created by the British, who joined together 3 very different regions: the North, the West, and the East, without considering their deep differences in culture, religion, and politics. The North was mainly Muslim and led by traditional rulers. The West was home to the Yoruba people, educated and politically active. The East was dominated by the Igbo, known for their business and ambition. The British managed Nigeria by playing one region against another. They gave political power to the North, economic power to the West, and commercial freedom to the East. So, when they left, they handed over a country already divided by mistrust and competition. Each region believed it could lead better than the other. After independence, Nigeria was governed by 3 main political parties: the Northern People's Congress, NPC, led by Ahmadu Bello and Tafawa Balewa; the Action Group AG in the West, led by Obafemi Awolowo; and the National Council of Nigerian Citizens, NCNC, in the East, led by Nnamdi Azikiwe. Each party represented its own region more than the whole nation. Instead of uniting, politicians began to fight for regional control. Who would rule Nigeria and who would control the oil and resources? Corruption grew fast. Elections were rigged. Tribal politics replaced national interests. In the 1964 general election, results were widely disputed. In the West, violence broke out. Houses burned, people died. The slogan, Operation Weti, became a symbol of political chaos. Nigeria's democracy was dying before it even learned to walk. By January 1966, the country was in total confusion. A group of young Nigerian soldiers decided to take power by force. Their leader was Major Chukwuma Kaduna Nzeogwu, an Igbo officer. They claimed they wanted to end corruption and tribalism, but their plan went wrong. They killed top government officials, most of whom were northern and western leaders, while few Igbo politicians were harmed. Many Nigerians, especially in the north, saw the coup as an Igbo plot to dominate the country. After the coup, Major General Johnson Agriyi Ironsi, an Igbo, became the new head of state. He promised peace and unity, but one of his first moves, abolishing regional governments, was misunderstood. To northerners, it looked like Ironsi wanted to remove their power completely. The tension boiled over. In July 1966, northern soldiers carried out a revenge coup. Ironsi was captured and murdered. Thousands of Igbo soldiers and civilians were killed in northern cities. The killings spread fast. Ordinary Igbo men, women, and children were slaughtered on the streets of Kano, Kaduna, and Zaria. Trains carrying refugees to the east arrived filled with blood and corpses. It was a national tragedy. By the end of 1966, Nigeria was broken beyond repair. The North wanted revenge, the East wanted safety, and the federal government, led by Lieutenant Colonel Yakubu Gowon, struggled to restore control. In the eastern region, Colonel Chukwuemeka Odumegu Ojukwu watched his people return home from the north, beaten, orphaned, and angry. He pleaded with the federal government to protect them and rebuild trust, but nothing concrete was done. The government failed to act quickly and decisively. That failure would prove fatal. In January 1967, both sides met in Aburi, Ghana to find a peaceful solution. There, Ojukwu and Gowon agreed on a plan. Each region would have control over its affairs, but Nigeria would remain one country. It was called the Aburi Accord, a peace deal that could have saved millions of lives. But when they returned home, everything changed. The federal government did not fully implement the agreement. Ojukwu saw that as a betrayal. Gowon saw Ojukwu's anger as rebellion. And so, the bridge between peace and war collapsed. The East was now preparing for independence. On May 30th, 1967, Ojukwu stood before microphones and declared the Republic of Biafra, an independent nation for the people of the eastern region. The announcement was met with cheers across the East. For them, it was the beginning of safety and self-determination. But in Lagos, the federal government called it treason. To them, Ojukwu was breaking the country apart. Tension turned to war. The federal government moved troops toward the east. A total blockade was placed. No food, no medicine, no fuel in or out. And on July 6, 1967, the first gunshots were fired. The Nigerian Civil War, or the Biafra War, had begun. The people were exhausted. The dream of independence had turned into a nightmare of starvation. On January 12, 1970, Biafran forces laid down their arms. General Philip Effiong, acting head of Biafra, announced the end of the war. 3 days later, he met with General Gowon in Lagos. In a calm voice, Gowon declared, "No victor, no vanquished." The guns went silent, but the wounds were deep. When the war ended, Nigeria promised reconciliation, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. The 3 R's. But for many families, nothing could replace what they lost. Entire towns were gone. Millions of people were displaced. Children grew up without parents. Parents buried all their children. The economy collapsed. Trust disappeared. And scars of suspicion remained between regions. Yet, the government's greatest mistake was this. It failed to tell the truth about the war. Schools avoided it. History books stayed silent. Generations of Nigerians grew up not knowing what truly happened. Only fragments and rumors. More than 50 years later, Nigeria still carries the shadow of Biafra. Ethnic tension, injustice, and corruption, the same problems that caused the war, remain. The lesson of Biafra is not about who won or lost. It is about what happens when leaders fail to listen, when unity becomes a slogan instead of a practice, and when ordinary citizens pay for the pride of those in power. For the survivors, the war never truly ended. They still remember the smell of smoke, the sound of bombs, the cries in the night. They remember the faces of those who never came back. One woman once said, "We were not fighting to leave Nigeria. We were fighting to leave the Biafra War," remains one of Africa's greatest lessons. It showed how fragile peace can be when justice is ignored. It showed that unity without fairness is an illusion. And it reminded the world that a government's greatest duty is to protect its own people, not destroy them. Both sides claimed they were fighting for justice, Both sides believed they were right, but before the war was over a million Nigerians would lose their lives. The federal government, led by General Yakubu Gowon, called the operation a police action. He believed Biafra would surrender within weeks, but the eastern region, under Colonel Odumegu Ojukwu, refused to give up. Biafran engineers built weapons from scrap metal. Young men left schools and offices to fight. Women cooked for soldiers. Nurses turned homes into makeshift hospitals. It was a war of survival, not conquest. At first, Biafran forces gained ground. They captured towns in the Midwest and even pushed toward Lagos. But the Federal Army regrouped, better armed and larger in number. Within months, they recaptured lost territories and began advancing into Biafra's heartland. By the end of 1967, the fighting had spread everywhere, from the swamps of the Niger Delta to the dusty roads of Nsukka. As the war dragged on, the federal government imposed a total blockade on the eastern region. No food, no medicine, no fuel, nothing in or out. They believed starving Biafra would end the rebellion faster, but it became a war, not just against soldiers, but against civilians. By 1968, hunger had become the deadliest weapon of the war. Diseases spread through refugee camps. Villages were filled with graves dug by hand. The world was shocked. Newspapers in Europe called it the Biafran tragedy. Church groups, charities, and journalists rushed to help. International agencies like the Red Cross and Caritas tried to fly food into Biafra by night. Sometimes their planes were shot at. Sometimes they landed in total darkness, guided only by kerosene lamps on the runway. Despite their courage, it was never enough. For every bag of food that landed, hundreds of children had already died. Ask those who lived through it, and they'll tell you. It was not just hunger, it was hopelessness. People sold their last belongings for a cup of gari. Parents watched their children fade in their arms. Hospitals ran out of medicine. Doctors used salt water as drips. In some areas, people survived on lizards, cassava leaves, and anything that could stop the pain in their stomachs. And still, the war continued. Both sides broadcast propaganda, promising victory, blaming the other for every loss. But in truth, there were no victors, only victims. Around the world, the Biafra War became a political chessboard. Britain, Nigeria's former colonial ruler, supported the federal side, supplying weapons and diplomatic cover. The Soviet Union did the same, eager to win influence in Africa. France, Israel, and a few others quietly aided Biafra, mostly for strategic interest, not compassion. The United Nations spoke of peace, but action came too late. What began as Nigeria's internal problem had become a global tragedy. Televised starvation, the first of its kind. For many watching abroad, Biafra became a symbol of African suffering and Western silence. By late 1969, Biafra was collapsing. Its territory had shrunk to a small corner of the southeast. Supplies were gone. Soldiers fought barefoot, some with no bullets. Today, as Nigeria continues its journey, the memory of Biafra should not divide. It should warn. Because every nation that forgets its history is bound to repeat it. The Biafra War remains one of Africa's greatest lessons. It showed how fragile peace can be when justice is ignored. It showed that unity without fairness is an illusion. And it reminded the world that a government's greatest duty is to protect its own people, not destroy them.